Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be looking at the basics of what you may call monetary theory. Um, it's a really fascinating subject to look at, and it, I don't know, it caught my interest certainly. And the basics or the fundamentals of money is not ones that are not really the ones that are present today with the current monetary system in place worldwide, right? So in this video, I wanted to try to express some of what I learned from looking into the history of money, the origins of money, the fundamentals of money, and try to present them in a way that's understandable, even to perhaps a kid. Try to express it in a simple form. So what we got to start with. First of all, I want to acknowledge the books that have influenced me, or that basically I acquired my knowledge from, and in no particular order. Two of them are by Murray Rothbard, one of them by Carl Menger. What is Government Under Our Money? The Origins of Money and the Mystery of Banking. I recommend all of them. It would be like a good package of books to get together, and they they sort of fill in the gaps that a certain book may have. Um, so you basically supplement that with the knowledge or the information that the other book provides. And a lot of the examples, um, a lot of how the origins and the fundamentals of money is similar or directly derived from these books. So you guys should certainly check them out. So we got to start with the barter economy, which means an economy or a market with no money or no medium of exchange in use. So let's say, just for the sake of this explanation, it's a market that consists of four people. Let's say person A brings eggs to the market. Person B brings milk to the market. Person C brings apples. Person D brings oranges. Very basic, right? But here is the obstacle that a barter economy would face. So let's say Paul, who got eggs, wants to acquire milk, and a person named Jack is apparently has milk in this scenario, in this case. So Paul goes up to Jack, offering to trade his eggs for Jack's milk, but the request is rejected, because Jack doesn't want eggs. Perhaps, he's already got eggs from somebody else, and maybe he's already got plenty of them, so he doesn't want eggs. And so this kind of an obstacle is always present in a barter economy. That means somebody that you want to trade with needs to be in the case where they exactly want what you have. And this is called a double coincidence of wants. So if we don't, if you don't want what I have and I want what you have, then the trade will not proceed, because we want something else. So what does Paul do in this instance? So he's got to figure out, in order to get that milk from Jack, he's got to figure out what Jack actually wants. actually desires. So he realizes, or he finds out, that what Jack wants is tomatoes. So let's say there's a person named Mike who's got tomatoes, and now, and let's say in this case, luckily for Paul, Mike's actually seeking eggs. He's seeking 4 eggs. So they make a trade. Now Paul does not necessarily want tomatoes himself. So he's not purchasing tomatoes for his own use or for his own consumption, but rather he's purchasing those tomatoes in order to trade them for the milk that Jack possesses. So he's basically using these tomatoes as what is called instrument of indirect exchange. That's what Rothbard calls it in his book, also known as medium of exchange. Now, of course, this is a strategy that Jack utilized, an effective strategy in order to get what he wanted. So it's an indirect route to acquire what he desires. But this is a strategy that perhaps, even if in this hypothetical Barter economy, Jack is the first person to figure it out, he won't remain the only person. Other people, will eventually realize what Jack has done, and they will want to emulate this strategy themselves. So others are also trying to seek out things that they can acquire in order to exchange that for what they desire. So what they end up doing, and Carl Menger points this out, is if somebody brings a good to a market, they try to exchange that market for something that's more saleable or more marketable. So certain commodities that's almost guaranteed to sell. That's what they desire. And if they acquire those commodities, they have a higher likelihood, a higher chance of acquiring what they indeed initially desired or initially intended to acquire. So several commodities have historically been used for this purpose. One is tobacco, another is salt or even sugar, nails, copper, seashells, and even fish, perhaps in its dried form. But there were two commodities. Now, if you could see this as a competition between various commodities in the competition for to be in the position of medium of exchange, there are two commodities that have consistently got ahead, consistently excelled in this market or sector of the market, we should say, which is also the half of every transaction, as they say. And these two commodities are gold and silver. But you may be wondering, why is it gold and silver that have consistently been effective in exploiting this opportunity and providing the demand or supplying the demand for a medium of exchange? Well, there are certain properties or qualities to a medium of exchange which are expected of them, and so let's go through them now. One is they got to be divisible. So something like a house or a tractor would certainly not do, because you can't break them up and buy, let's say, something that costs you can't break up your house and expect to get traded for a loaf of bread, for example, right? And it's got to be portable. So something like coins is ideal. And of course, with gold and silver, you could easily mint coins out of them. It's got to be durable. So perishables like food, milk, eggs would certainly not do. but it's also got to be high in demand. Also, high value per unit weight. So this is sort of relevant to the first point, which basically means it's got to be high in demand. But also, if you break it up as individual pieces, also got to retain that high value status, right? So let's say you have a bullion of a precious metal, and if you break it down into smaller pieces, into bits or chunks, or even mint coins out of them, they still carry that value, right? They can still be used effectively as a medium of exchange. But most importantly here, prominently here, is it's got to be high in demand. And it will be high in demand if it correspondingly is scarce in quantity. So that means something like wheat or water would not do because there's a plenty of it in the world. So let's say, society advances past the barter economy, and they start using commodities like gold and silver as medium of exchange. People figure it out and they start utilizing those commodities for that purpose. But it would not necessarily be safe to keep those things in your house, right? You are taking a risk if you just hold a large possession of these commodities in your home, because somebody may eye them and see this as an opportunity, as take it and use it however they wish for their own benefit, right? You could get robbed. That's the point. So in order to prevent that possibility, you would proactively look for options to protect your property, the property you hold in these commodities, which you utilize as a medium of exchange. So you would look around for your options. You would shop around for your options. And let's say there are people or firms that are willing to provide you that service. You store with them your gold, your medium of exchange, and they will store it for you. So you shop around, you see what your friends are telling you, you see what the market is presented with you in your society, in your locality. So let's say in this market there are three firms: firm A, firm B, firm C, and these are what Rothbard called money warehouses. So they would function just like a warehouse. You store something with them, and then they hold on to it for your period of time until you want it back, right? So let's say in this scenario, you end up choosing firm B. So here's you. You take your money, and you decide to go with the service of firm B of protecting your money, your property. And in exchange, the warehouse, the money warehouse, gives you receipts, also known as banknotes. All right. Now this is, of course, from here we can deviate to the discussion of inflation. That is, you see, firm B, if they're reliable and if people trust them, and they're a sound institution, then how much ever receipts that they issue, they would hold exactly that amount in their vault, right? But when these sorts of firms, when these money warehouses or these banks engage in fraud, that is issuing more receipts than there are actual money stored in their vaults that is known as fractional reserve banking. But that perhaps could remain as a topic for another video because I guess it requires its own extensive discussion. Now I want to share with you an excerpt from a book that I've completed recently. A great book I recommend it to you all. And I will share the info of that book soon in this video. But it basically draws out or sketches out succinctly the history of money and the history of money to how we got it now in the current day. How we got fiat money, that is money that is uh, that is that is so by the mere sake of fiat or decree, right? And here's an excerpt from the book that I like to read verbatim. The usual pattern in the history of money has been as follows. Society adopts a commodity money, as we went through earlier. That is a transition from a barter economy to going to a market or an economy that actually uses a certain commodity for the purpose of minimum exchange. And then two, paper notes issued by banks that can be redeemed in a given weight of the commodity, and a given weight of the commodity money begin to circulate as a convenient substitute for carrying precious metal coins. So just like we said with the money warehouses, you go exchange your property in the medium of exchange. So you go trade or you go store that in a money warehouse, and they give you receipts or banknotes in exchange. And then people start to figure out that instead of carrying around bullion or coins around them or in their house, they figure out that they can just use the receipts of these warehouses and they can just exchange that instead, right? And of course, certain banks got to develop a reputation for being sound in that way that people don't really see a need to go and redeem their receipts. They they find these receipts or they perceive these receipts to be genuine. And then finally, government confiscates the commodity to which the paper notes entitle their holders, that should be, and thereby leaves the people with an inconvertible fiat paper money. Now, this is, of course, well, let me share the reference now. It's from the book Meltdown by Thomas Woods. Totally recommend it. What was I gonna say there though? Yeah, so this is the general pattern that 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 is present in the history of money, right? You can find out the specific details by checking out some of these books, or just simply looking into the history of the currency in your own jurisdiction, right? In Canada or USA or somewhere else. But the most famous example is that of in the US, where in 1933, under the administration of Roosevelt, they decided to basically take everybody's, confiscate everybody's holdings in gold. And that is when domestically the United States went off the gold standard, right? And then they held somewhat a phony gold standard internationally, which didn't last a while because events occurred, and then they set up various models and paradigms internationally for the monetary system that they wanted to impose. And finally, even on the global scale, under President Nixon, I believe in 1971 or 73. Um, the link between dollar and gold was cut completely, and that is the situation we now find ourselves in. And now you see, something to consider is that these precious metals, since they are certainly scarce, they're finite in amount, and they're difficult to mine and mint and basically increase in quantity. So in that sense, they restricted government in being able to expend in however they wish. But once they were released from the restraint, and they were able to just print money and use it to fund whatever program or whatever desire they had, they exploited that opportunity. Because think of it this way: imagine a certain jurisdiction, right, a country, and only you have the printer, and only you have the privilege to be able to print pieces of paper that's going to be considered money. Only you do. So you can basically print how much ever you wish, and you could take it to the store, you could take it to the market, and exchange those pieces of paper that you just printed with a click of a button to the goods that people have put in work and effort to manufacture, and produce. So imagine you having that privilege alone in an entire jurisdiction. And you don't have to work at all. All you have to do is click buttons and you have money. And you could buy whatever you wish with that money. Now, if anybody had that sort of privilege, don't you think there would be a serious temptation to abuse it? I mean, why would you ever want to work again? Just keep on printing money and go buy whatever you wish. Now, that is exactly what the entity of the state in 196 countries around the world, that's exactly the opportunity that they've discovered and continue to exploit. And that's why we see money all around the world, these currencies all around the world depreciating at an accelerating pace, right? I mean, you could compare gold to the U.S. dollar, right, which is around. Well, I don't remember to U.S. dollar, but to Canadian dollar is around 2,500 now. But then you could compare, various other currencies from Asia or Africa or South America, and if you compare their exchange rate to the U.S. dollar or Canadian dollar, it's just basically a more extreme form of what the fiat currencies in North America are engaging as well. I mean, anybody who had that privilege, they would have no desire to work. They just they have this incredible opportunity to satisfy any desire, any wish they have of purchasing a certain good or service. So that's how you should perceive the privilege of issuing money that government has appropriated for its own use through the establishment of a central bank. And that is why the proponents of free market ought to be consistent in their principles, and argue against fiat money, because money is is the half of every transaction that occurs in the market, right? Every time you buy a certain good or certain service, you're exchanging one good for another, or service for a good, right? But you also got to consider it this way. Imagine, imagine there are two people, and they're exchanging. And let's say for a while they've set up a partnership and they exchange a certain good for a certain good. But for some reason, let's say person A and person B, but for some reason, the good that person A provides for person B is increasingly depreciating in quality, increasingly on an annual basis. But person B, gets suspicious of this, and they rightly should be, because the culprit of the products or the good that's offered by person A, the culprit of the depreciation of its quality is person A himself who manufactured or produced that good. So that's how you got to see it, right? If you offer a certain good in the market, and yet what's 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 being traded and exchanged is on annually or even monthly depreciating in value, depreciating in quality, you gotta be suspicious of the issuer or the producer or the manufacturer of that good. And the good in this case in particular we're talking about is money. So when it comes to the issue of inflation, which I said we may perhaps leave it for another video, but I want to comment on briefly. You gotta place the blame on the entity issuing the money, because they're putting up a good, if you could momentarily perceive it that way, that's persistently decreasing in its value. But instead, government, by changing definitions of inflation and seeing it as an increase in prices, they wish to shift the focus of discussion regarding inflation and placing the blame on business owners, on entrepreneurs, on saying that it was they who are guilty of causing inflation because they're charging higher prices. But if you think about it, those entrepreneurs who are providing the market with goods, if what they were taking in exchange for their goods was constant, meaning that this year, next year, a decade from now, remained relatively the same, relatively stable, then there would be no need for them to require more of it in exchange for the good that they're offering. But yet that seems to be the case, not with only one business owner or entrepreneur, but but when you look at the market as a whole. So the proper direction or the proper place to, or to perceive the problem correctly would be to see the state, the central bank in particular, as the culprit in the persistent depreciation of money. All right, I think I unnecessarily extended that describing of inflation. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something, and hopefully I was able to present this in a understandable manner, and I was able to carry this out smoothly because I just hit record and go through my slideshow. And of course, there are many pauses, there are many stumbles and hurdles along the way, and excuse me for that, but if I was able to convey to you the knowledge of the history, the origins, and the fundamentals of money, then I have accomplished my goal. Thank you. Like, share, subscribe.